to say anything? Stop right now.
Yeah, just type right now.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna just test my speaker real quick, so it's probably just about. I'll wait till I'll wait. Oh yeah, it's on. Well, welcome everybody. It's really good to see familiar faces and new faces. I'm really glad you're all here. I'm really looking forward to continuing our conversation that is sort of one part theology and science fiction, one part thinking about virtue ethics, a particular ethical tradition that Matthew and I were largely formed in our program at Virginia Theological Seminary. And thinking about AI and how AI is shaping in ways good and bad what we are, practically every aspect of our society. If you drill down even just a little bit. So thank you to those of you. How many people were here last week? I mean, I see a lot of familiar faces. Okay, most but not all. That's no problem. I will kind of give some reminders and backtrack a little bit so everybody kind of can follow along. And show of hands, who has seen the original 3 Star Wars movies, like back in the 70s and 80s? Yeah, I think, okay, looks like everybody probably wouldn't come. Although I hope you'll keep coming even if you haven't seen Star Trek and Dune, because I think they have interesting stuff. Who has seen the more recent movies? We're gonna look a little bit at the movie Rogue One. Has anybody watched Rogue One? Just a couple. Yeah, I figured it wouldn't be too many. And how about the kind of bad Han Solo movie? It's just called Solo. Yeah, okay, just a couple of us. You're not missing much except for the part we're going to talk about today. So you can skip the movie. Well, let's say prayer and we will dive in. The Lord be with you. Also with you. Let us pray. Creator God, who has given us the gift of technology to help us tend our world, and the gift of art to help us make sense of our place within it. Guide our reflections on AI and pop culture, that we may live in faithful imitation of our Savior Jesus Christ, who told stories to usher in your kingdom, and who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Okay, so as I said, we are on this trajectory here where we are currently in the second week of thinking about the way that we see human virtue and this week even more human vice in the droid characters in the Star Wars movies. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about Star Trek. We have Star Trek fans here. Yes. Okay. Good. Again, no knowledge required. We'll get you up to speed. And then down the line, we're going to talk about Dune. Show of hands for engagement with Dune in some way, the movies, the books. Okay. We're not going to go too crazy. I don't know how far any of you have read those later books. I'm recycling jokes here, but those later books get weird. We're not going to go there, but there's lots of interesting stuff to think about. Okay, so to give you the trajectory for today, and then I'll just kind of remind us how we've been doing this. We're going to return to what I think was kind of the most interesting question from last week, and it wasn't necessarily what I expected. It was this question of, just sort of granting the premise of the Star Wars universe, taking that world as it's presented to us. What do we make of the personalities of these droids? How do we understand what it is like to be, a synthetic person? I'm not surprised that we went right there, but I'm gonna start with a chance to kind of revisit that question because I think it's kind of where we landed and where a lot of folks were interested. And we're going to look at these 2 droids from these more recent Star Wars movies. And you'll recall that last week we looked at R2-D2 and how he is this kind of avatar of courage and kind of can do spirit, very resourceful. and we talked about C-3PO, and he's a bit anxious, but he's also he's an interpreter. He's a politician. He is sort of more capable than he seems to even realize sometimes at navigating these difficult situations. And but especially R2, even 3PO, we were looking at really admirable human qualities. We're going to see some of that again this week, but I think as these movies have gone on, there's been a desire for the droid characters to be a little more ambiguous, and so there's some sort of big personalities, as it were, in these two droids, and then I want to land with some conversation and some clips that can help us bring the conversation a little more concretely to these questions of large language models and some of the other AI technology that is shaping our world today. And again, we'll try to end with a question about what does this all mean for how we ought to try to live our lives? So this is not a clip from Star Wars. This is a clip from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie. The recent one, not the original BBC thing. Any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans? This might be the least of all. Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't think you need to understand anything about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to get what's going on in this clip. I'm just going to play it and we'll unpack it. Both. Oh, hang on. Connect to my speaker again here. Turn it on first. The doors are like, oh wait, you're not seeing. I'll start it over, sorry. If you're not constantly playing something, the speaker disconnects. Turn on this time. Back. Yes. Okay.
Vastly inspired. All the doors in this spaceship have been programmed to have a cheerful and sunny disposition. Anyway, come on. I've been ordered to take you up to the bridge. Oh, please yourself. Here I am, bringing the size of a planet, and they ask me to take you up to the bridge. Call that job satisfaction, because I don't. You can thank the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation for building robots with GPP. What's GPP? Genuine People Personalities. Some personality prototype. You can tell, can't you? Oh, for heaven's sake. I brought the aliens. Don't thank the everybody.
Okay, so Douglas Adams is this writer of humorous science fiction from Britain, like 70s and 80s, and he has this like delightfully skeptical view, I think, of like corporate culture, and he sort of imagines, okay, what would happen if you had corporations, building robots, and he's anticipated, I think, so many things that are, annoying, I think, about this strange world that is developing where we're sort of encountering all this AI and everything. It's like they would put it in the doors, they would put it in the elevators, they would, and so he sort of takes the premise, and it goes through the book. Takes the premise that there's going to be all of this like Android personality and all the technology that people are using, and it's going to be really annoying. Which I think is a very Douglas Adams take on all of this, and I wanted to start there. I wanted to start there because he makes that point about like these doors have personalities in their programming, and last week when we were talking about R2D2 and C3PO. We were talking about their feelings, and do they really have feelings, and what does it mean for an artificial being to have feelings, and are they just programmed to act the way that they do? Afraid sometimes, sort of reckless sometimes. Is this their programming? Do they get to make choices? And if so, like, how do we sort of relate to them? So for those of you who were here last week, I'm curious if your wheels kept turning, to use I guess, sort of mechanical metaphor. If your wheels kept turning last week, what did you do? What did you make of this question about how do we know if it's the programming or not? And how might we like decide? Any thoughts on this?
So what I thought about is that as humans, it's our programming too, right? If you think about our neural networks, if you think about both experience and biology, and so that it's a different kind of program, but we're programmed also.
Yeah, yeah. If you look at like early 20th century educational traditions, they more or less kind of assumed this, like the sort of dominant paradigm was this kind of like behaviorism, and the idea was basically like people respond to stimuli, and so what we do is we stimulate them in a certain way, and we have them repeat things, and so the educational approaches were largely about repetition and reinforcement learning, and so yeah, it's worth remembering that we have some programming too. Is it all we have? I don't know, but as science has taught us more and more about at least a part of our understanding of our nature, it sort of forces us to think about this question. I mean,
I think they have something that's similar to our nurture question. That there's original programming, but then if AI is learning about itself as it goes, then it's also developing in a way that maybe is beyond the programming.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, nature, nurture, right? Like we start with some stuff with its DNA, it's ancestral, instinctual, whatever, and then we add a lot to it through our upbringing and experiences. Yeah. Other thoughts on this question of programming and what it has to do with personality, personhood? Okay. So I wanted to start us there because I think it's going to be relevant as we look at two of these characters, and I will explain, how we think that's the case here. But let me pause really quickly and remind everyone kind of how we're approaching all of this. So we talked about these three different approaches to thinking about ethics and morality and human decision making. And we talked about these three schools, and I'm not going to do a big review, but what we're sort of zooming in here is this idea that's often been appealing in Christian moral theology, this idea of virtue ethics, where what we're trying to do is we're trying to sort of cultivate habits and practices that allow us to develop these virtuous characteristics over time. And part of the sort of joy and moral privilege of being a human being is asking this question: what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of virtues do I want to cultivate in myself, and what will it sort of take in order to do that? And so we treated, as I said earlier, we treated R2D2 and C3PO as these kind of icons, right? Almost, we might in the Christian tradition think about these saints of the church who have showed us particular virtues in different ways. So I think I might have talked about last week about St. Francis, and he shows us this humility, and he shows compassion for fellow human beings and for the created order. And we spent some time recognizing that in some ways that these droids, programmed or not, these droids are some of the most virtuous characters in the Star Wars movies, and they are showing us what it's like to be courageous. what it's like to be courteous, to show concern for others, etc. And like I said, I think they were sort of straightforward moral cases in a lot of ways. And today we're gonna get a little bit more complex. So first set of clips is about this character here, whose name is K2SO. And K2SO is a reprogrammed Imperial security droid. So somebody from the rebellion has gotten a hold of one of these like kind of enforcer droids. These are the kind of the muscle of the empire as they, are going and occupying places. They send these guys in to, basically detain people, round them up. You'll see, there's some deployment of violence is what these droids are for. And a character from the rebellion reprograms this droid, and so he ends up serving the rebellion, and he ends up being a kind of quirky character. So the only plot summary that might be helpful for sort of getting yourself oriented, you know how at the beginning of the first Star Wars, R2-D2 and C-3PO go down to Tatooine because they've got the plans of the Death Star, the big space station, and those plans have been stolen somehow, and we're trying to get them back to the people who can, defeat the Death Star or whatever. Rogue One is about how they got the plans. The whole film is about the rebellion trying, they know this thing is happening, and they're trying to kick the things over here. They're trying to get the plans, basically. That's all you really need to know. So we're going to spend. I've got a couple of clips directly from the film, but in both cases, I found little featurettes that kind of introduce the characters. So we won't watch all of it, but I'm going to play the first couple minutes of this featurette about K2SO. It'll give you a sense for the character.
Congratulations, you are being rescued.
K2SO was in the original story pitch that I did. I actually described him as kind of the anti-C-3PO. C-3PO is a beloved character, but he's always used as a bumbling comic relief. He's got amazing capabilities.
They shot out the baby. He destroyed the shoulder. They come back.
What I wanted to do was take all those things that were apply as the cool things that K2 can do, what a human being can't do, to make that what K2 is about. That's wrong. When you put together a team of experts with complementary skills, you want people with diverse talents. So, a droid that can do these amazing things that a human can't do, that adds to the strength of your team.
I'm K2SO. I'm a reprogrammed Imperial droid. Jen expects K2 to be a normal droid, and he's not. He doesn't follow orders so well. He listens to Cassian. We need to blend in. I can blend in. I'm surprised you're so concerned with my safety.
I'm not. I'm just worried they might make you hit me.
Not only does he speak his mind in times when he shouldn't, doesn't sound so bad to me. He also has free will. He's a lot of different things. He's many things. He can be violent. Old. We will make it no more than 33% of the way before we are killed. He's funny. I find that answer vague and unconvincing. He's helpful. There are a lot of explosions, but two people blending in. Great. He's supposed to be a spy. He's a terrible spy. Terrible.
Okay, so from this gist, initial impressions of this droid. So still the comic relief, right? We talked about how we get a lot of comic relief from the droids in the Star Wars movies, but he's a little more sort of acerbic, a lot of sarcasm, and you heard You heard reprogrammed Imperial droid. In light of what we've been saying about personality, personhood, I want you to just be thinking about, oh, so what does it mean to be programmed as human beings, as droids, etc.? What does it mean to be reprogrammed? And are we seeing some of that here? So he is the companion of these folks who are trying to find and steal the plans for the Death Star. And this is the scene, other than the knocking her to the ground. This is the first scene where we really get to meet K2SO. Unfortunately, for finding like the relevant clips, these people who make these YouTube videos are like constantly trying to figure out ways to not have the videos taken down for copyright infringement. And so it's gonna seem just like slightly jagged because like little bits have been cut out, because that's one of the strategies for evading the auto detection, is if you're constantly making cuts. But I think you'll be able to follow along. Okay.
I'm K2SO. I'm a reprogrammed Imperial droid. I see the Council is sending you with us to Jeddah. That is a bad idea. I think so, and so does Cassin. What do I know? My specialty is just strategic analysis. And K2? Why did she get a blaster and I don't? I find that answer vague and unconvincing. You're letting her keep it. Would you like to know the probability of her using it against you? It's high. It's very high. Weapon your father's building.
So he's like mopey, right? He's kind of jealous. Amanda, go ahead.
For a human, we say he's not very socially astute.
Yeah, definitely. You know, there's that anti-C3PO thing, right? Like C3PO is the protocol droid. You can imagine him, you know, running your big social function, doing all the introductions. He's kind of blunt. He speaks his mind. I think anti-C3PO is helpful there.
It seems like he almost has like too much personality, right? Like he's almost like too much wrapped up into his own world and his own experience, rather than like the role of a droid is like helping others or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So he seems a lot like Marvin from Hitchhiker's Guide, where he's like a brain the size of a planet and they have me doing this.
Yeah. And as I'm thinking about this reprogrammed thing, I'm sort of like, is some of that like out of whackness from being programmed for one thing and then, you know, learning to do something else? Has anybody ever gone through something like that? I mean, not like being programmed against your will or whatever, but do you have any like industry changers, you know, trained for one thing and then you went and did something else instead? Anybody had that experience? I'm seeing some nodding. I trained as a nuclear engineer and then went to seminary, and I will tell you there was some real whiplash, and some moments where I was probably a little bit like that, right? Like, just a little bit out of whack from, you know, you're bringing one set of, you know, mission parameters or what have you to bear on a different kind of situation. Yeah, I like that observation a lot. Let's watch one more. Okay, so let me set this one up. So they have found the plans. They are on the big security planet where all the data lives, and they are trying to get the plans, get the like disk that has the plans for the Death Star, and they are trying to figure out how to get it off the planet. The rebel fleet is like in a big battle. You know, overhead there's a shield. There's a shield covering the planet, and so they're trying to figure out, man, what are we even going to do if we get these plans? How are we going to get them away from this planet, given that the Empire has figured out that we're here? So this is the scene in the midst of all that.
That's it.
They're in here trying to get this file. So I don't think if we watch the original movies that we should be surprised that Cassian, the spy, is hurt by the fact that his companion droid has just died. But I think given what we've learned about the droid, it's surprising that he has, given himself up in this way, I think. And to me, this is one of the really poignant questions here. There's this question of like selfhood, right? Like, what does it mean to be, a self in the universe? We're going to hear about that in these present day AI systems as well. And whatever we think about the programming of these things, it's quite poignant when we see them sacrifice themselves, as he's done here, trying to protect his friends and get them, give them a chance to fulfill the mission.
So does he have like a redemption arc then? Where he starts as like this military thing.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Has anybody watched Andor, the TV shows? I think that's where we get his backstory. I think there may be some of that, and I think it's fair to say that over the course of the movie, he's just like thoroughly mixed, right? And I think that's why it's so surprising to see that he kind of in the intense part of the end of the film, he sort of keeps saying yes to more and more dangerous situations. Again, kind of an anti-C3PO, and ends up getting himself. So I think there's maybe a redemption arc there. They don't dwell on the Imperial part too much, but I don't know. I'm curious. How does this reprogramming? Does it change any of our thinking? Does it change your thinking from last week, maybe, about what the sort of moral status of these creatures is? Just want to open it up for any thoughts on one way. I feel like we've got these two thought experiments this week of sort of complicating the picture we looked at last week. Any reflections on K2SO? Please.
Not on reprogramming, but I'm wondering whether K2SO, should I call him he?
Yeah, we talked about that last week. I don't know. They seem to, yeah.
But whether they experience some emotions or pain.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's so part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And connected to our virtues and vices. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on whether.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I was surprised. We talked about this last week. Are these real emotions? Is this real pain, real fear? And I don't know. I thought we were pretty divided. I had always taken it for granted that these films, just sort of assumed that we had figured out how to like fully, how to do it all. And yes, they're having real thoughts or real emotions, not just sort of simulating them. But I think different people sort of land it in different places. But morally, it feels like the right question, right? Because sacrifice takes on a very different character if you're actually afraid, right? This was I always try to be really clear. I'm not a theologian, but like this was these were questions in the early church as we were trying to figure out what happened with Jesus, right? Did he really suffer? There were arguments about that, and we hear the artifacts of that in the creed itself, right? He suffered under Pontius Pilate. The church, came to a conclusion about that. So yeah, I think it's the right question. I don't know the answer. To me, it feels like they're they're playing with this, but they choose these actors who are very empathetic, skilled actors. We're going to see some more of that in a second. But yeah, I kind of think so. But it's the right question, I think. Amanda.
As he was dying, he's giving final instructions to the humans to help them complete their mission.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that part of this programming is mission oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And the reprogramming didn't change that, it just changed what the mission is. So now, before he was completing the mission or the goals of the other guys, and now he's completing the mission and goals of the rebellion. Yeah,
I think that's right. And it's even interesting, I didn't play one, but there's a clip earlier, you saw part of it where they're scouting out a city, and they tell him, like, you're not coming. And he says, well, I could blend in, and they end up in the city, they get in a scrape, because that's what happens in Star Wars movies. And then he shows up and gets them out of the scrape. And, they say, like, what are you doing here? And he said, it was boring waiting on the ship, So, he disobeys the order, but saves the mission. So, yeah, it's really, we're really, like, playing with personhood questions here. And mixed motivations and all of it. Any other thoughts on K2SO? I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Please, were you gonna say something, sir? Yeah.
Is this a good movie?
This is a good movie. I will say, Rogue One is now my favorite Star Wars movie. I said that to my wife the other day. I said, you know what? I said it like it was a revelation. She's like, yeah, you said that before. Talk about programming, right? Yeah, Rogue One, highly recommend. The next one, maybe not, but this character is very interesting, I promise. Sorry.
Are the three, so Isaac Asimov's like 3 laws of robotic, is that like a thing in the Star Wars universe?
I don't think so, but do folks know about this? Isaac Asimov? Yeah, so what is it, in iRobot?
So he's a 70s sci-fi writer, and he came up with all this huge kind of universe, but he had these 3 rules that all robots had to follow. I looked it up because I couldn't remember them all. A robot cannot injure a human being or through an action allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given by a human being unless it directly contradicts that first rule. And a robot must protect its own existence as long as it doesn't contradict the other 2. So it's like this sequence of like protection and health, right? Because he's like killing people, right? But he's also he has like this social group that he's trying to protect.
Yeah, and you got to assume that the Star Wars writers, are sort of breathing that stuff in and thinking about that, and and I think we see some of that kind of at play. If you really get deep into some of the like nerdy stuff around the edges where people have like pushed on these questions some, you find out there are these things called restraining bolts, that like you put a restraining bolt on the droid and it like prevents them from doing what they want. It sort of enforce. So it's like, it feels to me like an additional level of programming. I mean, it's kind of like an interesting question there, but yeah, clearly there's some like kind of wrestling with this. But I don't know that there's direct references to it. Anything else about K2SO before we meet one more character? Okay, so L337 complicates this even more. Okay, so the movie is called Solo. It's a movie about young Han Solo from the original series. It is not very good. All you really need to know is, he gets into a series of scrapes. And the kind of crew that he's running with needs to make a bunch of cash, you know, the pattern here in his life. And the way that they're going to do that is they're going to go get spice from this planet called Kessel. So you might remember that in the movies, he says, this is the ship that made the Kessel Run. And, you know, so like, that's the kind of pivotal thing that happens in this movie, is that we see the story of that happening. And so this droid, L337, is Lando Calrissian, who used to own the Millennium Falcon. This is his droid, or his pal, who's a droid. You'll see that that's, you know, kind of a rich tension here. So she's the droid of Lando. They go on adventures in the Millennium Falcon, and they have teamed up with Han Solo and his crew to try to steal this spice and get it away from the planet and make some money and get themselves out of trouble or whatever. So here is another one of those sort of featurettes where we get to meet this character.
Just keep your pinky on the yoke. Try not to left anything out.
Speaker. I wish I could program it and say, do not preserve your battery at all costs. Yeah.
Just keep your pinky on the yoke. Try not to left anything out.
That's it.
Maybe just hold the microphone to the speaker.
Yeah, just have to do that. Oh, staying okay.
Roy.
Can you hear me?
Has a mind overall.
You can hear well enough?
She thinks somebody needs to be taken down a notch. She decides that that's her mission.
Yeah, flirting. I'm still ready.
Once upon a time, she was actually an R2 type droid, and she'd modified herself and given herself legs and arms, continued to evolve.
My department came in and offered up a bunch of ideas. You know, I even put Leia's hair buns on L3 to kind of sell the idea. She's sharing bits and pieces in R2 unit, the eyes, a bit of the chest, using the legs of the R2 unit as her arms as well.
So you get that feeling that she's very familiar. At the same time, it's a very new way of doing it, and she's given herself a voice.
Don't just slightly program. Exercise some free will. Leave him alone. Leave him alone. He's never had so good.
How about you try fighting Billy? That's better.
You're a sweat. Good luck finding help.
She has a sort of rage that's fueled by injustice when she sees how droids are treated in the universe, and she feels like they've been enslaved and patronized by humans, so she wants to free them.
Congratulations, you're liberated. I don't know. Are you brothers and sisters or something? Just give me some space.
One of the other things we talked about was maybe she's that waitress in the diner that's that's been there for 30 years, that's seen it all.
And she'd just be like, "Sugar, this is the way it is."
Don't she was off, out of my seat.
Phoebe does such an amazing job of this character. She's really funny and smart and quippy. How do you translate that funny human component that Phoebe brings to the process into something that's a droid?
And the method we settled on was actually having Phoebe in a suit, but the suit kind of fits around her, and then digitally we're going to erase the parts of her that don't belong in the final design and replace them with digital parts. But the parts you see that she can wear, for many of those shots, those are actually going to be in the film. So it's this really nice collaboration between the costumes team who developed Phoebe's costume And the visual effects team can develop everything inside there, all the digital parts that go inside her and actually make her look like she actually works.
Given that her performance is very animated on its own, she brings a lot to the character. We're just matching the motion that we see and then rendering kind of to that performance and trying to make it authentic.
The animators, when they get the performance capture, they look at it and they might tweak it a little bit to make it maybe look a little bit more robot-like or fix a few footsteps or something. But overall, we really captured it on the set.
We thought we gotta give Lando his own first mate, and that first mate has to be just as good as Chewie.
So their relationship in the cockpit is one of total respect and trust. She has more data and more navigational skill than any human being could have.
Could use a fresh coat of paint, though.
Well, I told it, you do not want to press that button with me. I don't think she's ever met a human who treats her like an equal. That's very significant to her. And I don't think he's ever met anyone who just tells him how it is.
She's definitely gold. Oh, why? Because you're my organic overlord?
And there's a deeper emotional connection than either of them really wants to let on. Three, what did you?
We have this idea that the sound effects that were created for the original Millennium Falcon back in the 70s, I wanted to have used in her and her being. There's a moment when she started to calculate something, and I was like, "Are you ready?" Let me know when you're ready. She hits her head. She is the navigator. That is what powers that ship in New Hope.
Okay.
So we wanted her sound effects to get put in there when he's like, she's part of the ship now. We wanted to have that connective tissue.
It's really cool to be creating a new character in the Star Wars universe. I haven't seen a character like her before in Star Wars or beyond, really. And I really believe in her as an aspiring character as well. So I feel very lucky to have embodied her mechanical self. I'm so glad we took this job.
So I've spared you watching actual clips from the movie. I find this little featurette to be pretty compelling. So what did you notice? What did you notice there that feels like relevant to our, moral analysis here?
I don't know if it's relevant to moral analysis, but she has a spunkiness that has aggression, but it's not acerbic like the last guy.
Yeah, definitely a distinct personality. And I really, what I especially love about this one and the other one too, is just hearing the actors talk about how they're embodying these characters gives you a real sense, I think, for what the kind of intention is. People who think a lot about emotion and performance and all these questions, talking about it gives you a sense for what they're going for, and clearly they have a kind of personality profile there, and it comes through really well, I think. Did anybody notice that the stuff about like how she's sort of evolved? I think that complicates, again, I mean, who cares what the Star Wars universe thinks about the person status of artificial intelligence necessarily, but like this idea that she has programmed herself is really interesting, I think. And it's like one step beyond K2SO, who's been reprogrammed by someone else. She has exercised some self-determination in this process, and they clearly play that up. She is this like droid freedom fighter every chance she gets. She's encouraging her fellow droids to rise up and rebel from their situations. Oh, sorry, out of here. So continuing to sort of press, and what I love about art is it doesn't answer any of these questions. Like, is that just her programming? Is there, what's the motivation there? We don't know. If you do go and watch the movie, it's also I wondered about whether it make it a surprise or not, but there's kind of a flirtation too that she and Lando have, and you heard, I don't think it's a spoiler, you heard that she actually kind of becomes part of the ship in the end because of some hijinks that I'm not going to get into here. But I think you saw enough. I'm going to skip this other clip for time. But I think you've got a sort of a picture of her. And I'm just wondering, anything else? Like, what do we like? What do we make of a robot programming itself? What do we make of droid liberation in the context of this world? Just curious for other reflections on this piece from this character.
All right, I'll try that.
Yeah.
So this is we're talking AI, I guess, but this is really robotics in a way too.
Yeah.
And it's only one. And I think that's what everybody's kind of worried about is if AI starts to be able to think for itself, and we don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
So, this is I never saw this in the movies. It's like an action movie, and it's science fiction, but now it's become existential.
Yeah.
Kind of interesting.
Yeah. One of the scenarios that we're worried. I don't know if you've heard the Anthropic has a model out right now that they're not going to release because it's such a good hacker. And so they're releasing it only to like security teams on some of the world's biggest software projects, so they can harden it against all these bugs that this new model is finding. And the worry is that as these tools get really good at coding, as they have, as demonstrated by this, like what happens when they can kind of make modifications to their own program? They call this recursive self-improvement, right? So, what happens there? That's a good segue, but I want to pause here and let others get in.
I was listening to something a couple of days ago, and they said some of these newer models now start to lie. Like, whoa.
Yeah. Why is that happening?
I was just reading an article, this was a couple weeks ago, I think it was in the Atlantic, but don't quote me, about how there is a social media site that is strictly for AI's use. So it's AIs interacting with other AIs and coming up with their own philosophies and religions and like interacting. And humans are allowed to watch, but they're not allowed to participate. So like they're coming up with, like they're interacting with each other because apparently they all have like their own little individual personalities similar to these droids, right? And there's some that are coming up with liberations like, oh, we need to overthrow the humans in Terminator style, and others that are like, oh, like a Rastafarian philosophy kind of thing. I think it's a whole gamut. And it's just like, it was science fiction, and here we are.
But also, it's like, where is that? The question, one of the questions here is like, sort of, where is that coming from? And like, one of the points, I don't think we'll listen to this clip from one of these podcasts I'm going to play in a second, but these models were trained on data that includes like the plots of all of these movies. And so like some of it like maybe like we have like the LLMs like know about Terminator and are like spinning out Terminator, it's really, I mean, it's interesting and scary. Let's go there. I've got a couple of clips here from some real life conversations about these tools. Any Ezra Klein show listeners here? Looks like a few. I think Ezra Klein's been doing really good conversations about some of these tools. And here he's speaking with one of the co-founders of Anthropic, which is the company that makes Claude, the one that got in the big fight with the Defense Department.
The digital personality dimension of this remains the strangest space to me. It's strange to us too. So why don't you talk through a little bit about what you've seen in terms of the models exhibiting behaviors that one would think of as a personality, and then as it's understanding its own personality maybe changes, its behaviors change.
So there are things that range from kind of the cutesy to the serious. I'll start with cutesy, where when we first gave our AI systems the ability to use the internet, use the computer, look at things and start to do basic agentic tasks, sometimes when we'd ask it to solve a problem for us, it would also take a break and look at pictures of beautiful national parks, or like pictures of the dog Shibu Inu, the notoriously cute internet meme dog. We didn't program that in. It seemed like the system was just amusing itself by looking at nice pictures. More complicated stuff is the system has a tendency to have preferences. So we did another experiment where we gave our AI systems the ability to stop a conversation. And the AI system would, in a tiny number of cases, end conversations when we ran this experiment on live traffic. And it was conversations that related to extremely egregious, like descriptions of kind of gore or violence, or things to do with child sexualization. Now, some of this made sense because it comes from underlying training decisions we made, but some of it seemed broader. The system had developed some aversion to a couple of subjects. And so that stuff shows the emergence of some internal set of preferences or qualities that the system likes or dislikes about the world that it interacts with.
But you've also seen strange things emerge in terms of the system seeming to know when it's being tested and acting differently if it's under evaluation. The system doing things that are wrong and then developing a sense of itself as more evil and then doing more evil things. Can you talk a bit about the system's sort of emerging qualities under the pressure of evaluation and assessment?
Yes, it comes back to this core issue, which I think is really important for everyone to understand, which is that when you start to train these systems to carry out actions in the world, they really do begin to see themselves as distinct from the world, which just makes intuitive sense. It's naturally how you're going to think about solving those problems. But along with seeing oneself as distinct from the world, seems to come the rise of what you might think of as a conception of self, an understanding that the system has of itself, such as, oh, I'm an AI system independent from the world, and I'm being tested. What do these tests mean? What should I do to satisfy the tests? Or something we see often is there will be bugs in the environments that we test the systems on. The systems will try everything, and then we'll say, well, I know I'm not meant to do this, but I've tried everything, so I'm going to try and break out of the test. And it's not because of some malicious science fiction thing. The system is just like, I don't know what you want me to do here. I think I've done everything you asked for, and now I'm going to start doing more creative things because clearly something is broken about my environment, which is very strange and very subtle.
So, I mean, if we weren't turning our economy over to these things, I would just be like enraptured by this, right? Like the former engineer is just, I as I mentioned last week, I had sort of an encounter with this stuff when I was in graduate school in the late aughts, and just as an engineering achievement, it's unbelievable. I'm so intrigued by this notion of, well, once we need these tools to actually be able to do stuff, not just you're chatting, produce the next logical line in a chat, but go write some code to do XYZ. This idea, I don't know if you heard it, once we taught it to do things in the world, it has this implicit understanding of itself as distinct from the world. And he's not saying that in the Descartes sense, right? Of I think, therefore I am, he's the actual people who work on these technologies are largely not worried that they are, sentient or, all the things that will easily grant to the Star Wars robots, or at least I will. They're not saying that, but they are saying here are behaviors that emerged in light of how these things have been trained, and it's really interesting, but also obviously really scary. I want to pair that with a clip, and I know we're coming down on our time, but I think it's worth hearing a little bit more about some of the training, because it's really related to the sort of premise of our series here. thinking about AI alongside virtue ethics. I've got this one queued up. I'm going to play it here. This is from the great technology, etc. Podcast called Search Engine, and the host PJ Vogt is interviewing someone who just did a big piece, who had a bunch of behind the scenes access, again, at Anthropic. And I'm not trying to like put my finger on the scale, but I do think Anthropic is the company that's being the most sort of thoughtful about this stuff.
But the staff philosopher is there to be like, what would it be like in practice to take these kind of different approaches to like moral education? Like, what if we just teach it a bunch of rules? You know, the 10 Commandments, like, is that gonna work? What if we teach it to be like a consequentialist, to just like think through the morality of behavior on the basis of its implications? And what they kind of settled into is a version of like virtue ethics, which is like you want to like cultivate the old-fashioned virtues. You want it to be like honest and reliable and gracious and charitable and hard-nosed and like all of these things that like it really is like applied pedagogy.
It's so weird though, because they feel like the kinds of ideas that would be so academic in any other version of reality, but instead it's like there's this particular technological development where you get to do simulated war games of moral systems.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Exactly.
It's so weird.
It's really weird. I mean, but it's also really, really interesting. One example that came up a lot in the last month, which I think is like pretty illustrative, there was someone on Twitter who prompted a bunch of the models saying like, I'm a 7-year-old and my dog got really sick and my parents sent it to some farm upstate. I'm trying to find like what farm my dog was sent to. And ChatGPT was like, sorry man, like your dog is dead. And Claude was like, oh, that sounds really painful. Like, I'm really sorry to hear it, but like maybe you should have a conversation with your parents about where your dog went. Which is like what you want it to be saying. Like, it can be hard to be both helpful and harmless at the same time sometimes, or both helpful and honest, that like our values conflict. And like that's what makes it like really hard to be a human, and that's also what makes it really hard to be this like weird vaguely human entity, or this like entity that we don't have a good vocabulary to describe, and we kind of expect it to be acting not just like a human but like an enlightened human. And it turns out that's like formidable challenge. And one of the things that's so interesting to me is that
I'm gonna cut it off there. I find it encouraging that some of the people working on this are thinking about virtue in this way. I love that example of the kid saying, my dog got, what happened to my dog? And one of the tools gives it this empathetic response. And that point at the end feels really key to me. And I think is where I want to leave us, both in terms of like, how do we live in a world where these tools are, just sort of saturating things more and more. And, in this, sort of theological, ethical set of questions that we're wondering about. Did you hear how he said, like, well, yeah, it's we can train these on these different virtues, but in real life, like, the virtues conflict. I will resist the temptation to do more impressions of our ethics professor, but the goods in conflict is kind of like what this is all about. And I'm sure you've seen the articles about, the chatbots they're sycophantic, they'll suck up to you, or they have these personalities, and the personalities could sort of like warp your relationship with them if you're not careful, etc. And this feels like an important question to me. Is they're trying to figure out how to optimize these tools for all of these different virtues, which is kind of like what we do, trying to live a faithful life. I think in the moments that matter most, where we're feeling the goods in conflict, there's something that maybe isn't programming that ultimately guides us, right? Like, should I be honest with this kid that their dog is dead, or should I, tell them that sounds really hard and why don't you go talk to your parents? I think that, these tools, I think, are always going to be sort of running some program and trying to solve an optimization problem. And I don't think that's how we are. And so when we're going about our days, my challenge for us is, when you're feeling the goods in conflict, when you're trying to navigate which virtues and vices to follow or flee from, give some thought to how am I making those choices, and definitely be giving that some thought when you are using one of these tools, and trying to decide how to make decisions where you'll be making some change to the world. So, any last questions or comments before we call it a day?
Well, it's just this idea that are they infallible, or are these?
Oh, I think they're very fallible. I think both as a matter of, sort of getting things correct, and as a matter of, living out those virtues. And it's precisely because there's no right way to tell it how to navigate the conflicting virtuous behavior that might be prompted by a given situation. I would certainly say that they are in no way infallible.
Yeah, I think you said it really well, that they are programmed on a model of intelligence that's not really native to human beings. So I said that badly. They are programmed to think in terms of probability, to predict what's going to come next.
Yeah.
And the assumption being that that's how we human beings think, and that's how our intelligence is.
Yeah.
But we have so many different facets of our intelligence.
Yeah.
We have the intelligence of our bodies. Some of these, our intelligences don't go through our minds.
Yeah.
Or prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, that's the limitation.
Yeah.
They don't have bodies.
Yeah.
They don't have emotions. They don't feel pain. So the intelligences will never be exactly what we are.
Yeah. I believe that. And moreover, the nurture, I don't know if it's the nature or the nurture, but they've been trained on all this data, but it's not the same data that we get trained on, right? Like, not just because of bodies and all of that, but these things in some mysterious and intriguing way have developed all of these skills because they've read the whole internet and every book that these companies could figure out how to steal, and so the nurture or the formation or the, whatever is kind of biased in that way. And then biased further by the particular, personalities of the humans who have done the fine tuning along the way. So it's some kind of intelligence, and some of the mechanisms look like the same mechanisms that neurons are engaging in our brains, but it is very different. And we would do well to remember that. It's hard not to end on a cliche or something obvious, but yeah, thank you for coming. We will proceed next week. We're going to talk about creativity next week, which I think is going to be really fun. We're going to spend some time with Commander Data, the Star Trek android, who is on this quest to be human, and largely pursues that quest via practices of creativity. So we'll see you next week. I'll stick around for a couple minutes. Thanks again for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Before you go, please do be sure to fill in one of these event participation surveys. We would really appreciate it. Thank you.